My girlfriend's family invited me to dinner, then tried to sell me something. I thought I was just meeting my girlfriend's parents for the first time, but I had no idea I was about to become the target of the most elaborate sales pitch of my life. Hi, my name's Ryan, and I, 28 years old, sat nervously in his apartment, adjusting his tie for what felt like the 10th time. Tonight was the night, the dreaded meet the parents dinner with his girlfriend Emma's family. They had been dating for 6 months, and Emma had been patiently waiting for the right time to introduce him to her parents. Ryan had heard stories about them, warm, welcoming, successful entrepreneurs who had built their business from the ground up. He was impressed, but also intimidated. As Ryan looked at himself in the mirror, he rehearsed what he might say. He wanted to make a good impression. Emma had assured him that her parents would love him, but still, the anxiety gnawed at his stomach. He had brought a bottle of expensive wine as a gift, something he hoped would show his sophistication and thoughtfulness. Emma arrived right on time, looking stunning in a simple but elegant dress. She kissed Ryan on the cheek and noticed his nervous demeanor. She reassured him that everything would be fine, that her parents were just regular people who were excited to meet the man who made their daughter so happy. The drive to her parents' house was filled with Emma's attempts to distract Ryan from his nerves. She talked about everything and nothing, work, friends, a movie they had seen last weekend. Ryan appreciated her efforts, but his mind kept drifting back to the impending dinner. What if they didn't like him? What if he said something wrong? What if they thought he wasn't good enough for their daughter? When they pulled into the driveway of a large, modern house in an upscale neighborhood, Ryan's heart rate increased. The house was impressive, all glass and sharp angles, with a perfectly manicured lawn and luxury cars parked in the driveway. This was more than he had expected. Emma's family was clearly doing very well for themselves. As they approached the front door, Ryan took a deep breath. He could hear laughter and music from inside. Emma squeezed his hand and gave him an encouraging smile. The door opened before they could knock, and there stood Emma's parents, beaming with welcoming smiles. Ryan was relieved to see how genuinely warm they seemed. Her father, a tall man with a firm handshake and kind eyes, immediately made Ryan feel at ease. Her mother, with her perfectly styled hair and designer clothes, hugged both Emma and Ryan as if they were already family. The house was even more impressive inside. Minimalist decor, expensive artwork, and panoramic views of the city from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ryan felt out of place in his modest apartment dweller's clothes, but Emma's parents didn't seem to notice or care about the difference in their economic statuses. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 people, though there were only 6 places set. Emma's brother and his wife were also there, and they were just as welcoming as her parents. The conversation flowed easily, with Ryan gradually relaxing as he realized that Emma's family was genuinely interested in getting to know him. They asked about his job as a software developer, his hobbies, his family background. Ryan answered honestly, occasionally making self-deprecating jokes that seemed to amuse them. Emma's father, Robert, talked about his business journey, how he had started with nothing and built his empire through hard work and innovative thinking. Ryan was impressed and inspired by his story. As the main course was cleared away and dessert was served, Ryan felt that the evening had been a success. He had survived the Meet the Parents dinner, and it seemed like they actually liked him. Emma caught his eye from across the table and gave him a subtle thumbs up when her parents weren't looking. Ryan smiled back, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. But as the evening progressed, Ryan started to notice subtle shifts in the conversation. Emma's family began talking more and more about their business, using terms that sounded vaguely familiar from corporate seminars he had been forced to attend. They spoke of synergy, leveraging networks, and multiple streams of income with an almost religious fervor. Ryan didn't think much of it at first. Successful people often had their own jargon and ways of talking about business. But then Emma's mother, Carol, started talking about how their business wasn't just about making money, but about helping people achieve their dreams and live their best lives. She looked directly at Ryan as she said this, her eyes intense and searching. The atmosphere in the dining room shifted as Carol's gaze lingered on Ryan. There was something different in her expression now, not just the warmth of a mother getting to know her daughter's boyfriend, but the focused attention of a salesperson assessing a potential client. Ryan couldn't quite put his finger on it, but a subtle tension had entered the room that hadn't been there before. Emma seemed oblivious to the change, happily enjoying her dessert and engaging in light conversation with her sister-in-law. But Ryan felt it acutely, the way Robert leaned forward slightly, the way Carol's eyes never left his face for more than a few seconds, the way Emma's brother and his wife exchanged knowing glances. Robert cleared his throat, and all conversation ceased. He stood up, walking around the table to stand behind Ryan's chair, placing his hands on Ryan's shoulders in a gesture that was meant to be friendly but felt possessive. Ryan resisted the urge to shrug them off. Robert began to speak about his business journey in more detail now, not just the rags to riches story he had shared earlier, but the specific strategies and principles that had led to his success. He talked about residual income and financial freedom with the passion of an evangelist. Ryan nodded along, trying to show interest while wondering where this was all leading. Carol stood up as well, moving to a large screen on the wall that Ryan hadn't noticed before. With a click of a remote, a professional-looking presentation filled the screen, complete with graphs showing exponential growth, testimonials from people who had achieved financial independence, and photos of luxurious vacations and expensive cars. Ryan's stomach tightened. This felt less and less like a family dinner and more like a business presentation. He glanced at Emma, who was now watching her parents with an adoring expression, completely caught up in their narrative. The presentation went on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. Carol was a dynamic speaker, moving around the room, making eye contact with everyone, but especially with Ryan. She spoke of changing lives and creating legacy, of breaking free from the 9-to-5 grind and building something that would last for generations. Ryan tried to maintain a neutral expression, but his mind was racing. This was starting to sound very familiar. The grand promises, the emphasis on recruitment, the focus on lifestyle rather than product. He had seen documentaries about multi-level marketing companies, read articles about people who had lost everything pursuing these dreams of financial freedom. As the presentation ended, Robert moved to stand beside his wife, his arm around her waist. They made a striking couple, confident, successful, persuasive. Ryan could see why people would be drawn to them, why they would believe in the vision they were selling. Carol spoke again, her voice softer now, more intimate. She shared a personal story about how their business had not only brought them financial success, but had healed their marriage, strengthened their family bonds, and given them a sense of purpose they had never found in traditional careers. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, and Ryan had to admit she was a compelling storyteller. Emma's brother and his wife chimed in now, sharing their own experiences of how joining the family business had transformed their lives. They spoke of paying off debts, buying their first home, traveling to exotic locations, all thanks to this incredible opportunity. Throughout all of this, Ryan remained silent, nodding occasionally, trying to process what was happening. Was this just a proud family sharing their success story, or was something else going on? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being sold something, that this entire evening had been orchestrated with a specific purpose in mind. As if reading his thoughts, Robert turned his full attention to Ryan now, his expression earnest and sincere. He asked Ryan about his own financial goals, about his dreams for the future, about whether he was truly satisfied with his current career path. These were fair questions, but the way they were asked felt leading, as if there was only one right answer. Ryan answered honestly but vaguely, not wanting to offend Emma's family, but also not wanting to give them any ammunition. He spoke of his passion for technology, his satisfaction in solving complex problems, his belief that he was building a valuable skill set that would serve him well in the future. Carol nodded along, but her eyes told Ryan that she wasn't satisfied with his answers. She pressed further, asking about his retirement plans, whether he was saving enough, whether he felt secure in his job.
Each question was more personal than the last, and Ryan began to feel uncomfortable, as if his entire life was being examined and found wanting. Emma finally seemed to sense Ryan's discomfort, placing a hand on his arm and suggesting that they should probably get going. But her parents would have none of it, insisting that there was one more thing they wanted to share with Ryan before they left. Robert disappeared into another room, returning with a stack of glossy brochures and a tablet computer. He placed them on the table in front of Ryan, spreading them out like a hand of cards. Each brochure featured smiling people, luxury lifestyles, and bold promises of wealth and happiness. The tablet was already open to a professional-looking website with a countdown timer suggesting a limited-time opportunity. Ryan's heart sank as he looked at the material spread before him. The company name was unfamiliar to him, but the business model was instantly recognizable. This was definitely a multi-level marketing company, complete with tiered compensation plans, recruitment bonuses, and the requisite emphasis on passive income and financial freedom. Carol began explaining the business model in detail, her voice smooth and confident. She talked about the quality of their products, some kind of health and wellness supplements, but quickly moved on to what she called the real opportunity, building a network of distributors under you and earning commissions from their sales. Ryan listened with a growing sense of dread. He had seen this pattern before, expensive products that were difficult to sell to retail customers, with the real money coming from recruiting others into the business. It was a model that benefited those at the top of the pyramid at the expense of those below. Robert chimed in, pointing to the compensation plan on the tablet. He explained how new distributors could quickly recoup their initial investment, then start earning significant income as they built their team. He used phrases like low risk, high reward, and proven system that Ryan recognized from sales pitches he had encountered before. Emma's brother and his wife added their own testimonials,
talking about how they had started part-time, then gradually built their business until they could quit their regular jobs. They emphasized the training and support provided by the company, painting a picture of a family-like community dedicated to helping each other succeed. Throughout this presentation, Ryan remained silent, his mind racing. He was in an impossible situation. These were his girlfriend's parents, people he wanted to impress and build a relationship with. But he fundamentally disagreed with what they were proposing. He believed in creating value through hard work and innovation, not through recruitment-driven sales models that often left participants worse off than when they started. Emma seemed completely caught up in her family's enthusiasm, her eyes shining with excitement as she looked at Ryan. She clearly expected him to be impressed, to see the incredible opportunity her family was offering him. Ryan felt a pang of disappointment. He had thought Emma shared his values, but perhaps he had been wrong. Carol noticed Ryan's silence and changed her approach. She began asking him personal questions about his financial situation, his job satisfaction, his long-term goals. Each question was designed to highlight perceived deficiencies in his current life path, creating problems that their business opportunity could supposedly solve. Ryan felt trapped. He couldn't bring himself to express his true feelings about MLMs, that he found them ethically questionable and financially risky for most participants. But he also couldn't pretend to be interested in joining their business, as that would be dishonest and might lead to expectations he couldn't fulfill. As if sensing his hesitation, Robert played his trump card. He began talking about how joining the business wouldn't just change Ryan's life, but would secure his future with Emma. He painted a picture of the two of them working together, building their empire, achieving financial freedom, while others were stuck in the rat race. He subtly suggested that Ryan's current career path might not provide the lifestyle Emma was accustomed to or deserved. This was a low blow, and Ryan felt a flash of anger. He was being manipulated, his relationship with Emma being used as leverage to pressure him into a business decision. He looked at Emma, hoping she would intervene, but she was nodding along with her father's words, her expression dreamy. Ryan knew he had to say something, to establish some boundaries, but he struggled to find the right words. He didn't want to offend Emma's family or create tension in his relationship, but he also couldn't compromise his values or pretend to be someone he wasn't. Carol must have sensed his internal conflict because she changed tactics again.
She began talking about the community aspect of the business, the lifelong friendships, the personal growth, the sense of belonging to something bigger than oneself. She spoke of conferences and retreats, of mentorship programs and support networks. She was painting a picture not just of financial success, but of personal fulfillment and community connection. Ryan had to admit it was tempting. He was a software developer, often working alone, sometimes feeling isolated in his career. The idea of being part of a supportive community, of working closely with Emma and her family, had a certain appeal. But he knew it was an illusion. The community was conditional, based on continued participation and success in the business. And the personal growth they promised came at a price, not just financially, but ethically. As the evening wore on, Ryan felt increasingly cornered.
Emma's family was relentless in their pitch, using every tactic they could think of to win him over. They appealed to his logic with graphs and projections, to his emotions with testimonials and success stories, to his relationship with Emma with promises of a shared future. Finally, Ryan knew he had to speak up, to draw a line in the sand before things went any further. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts, trying to find a way to express himself that was honest but not confrontational, that respected their enthusiasm while maintaining his own integrity. Ryan cleared his throat, and all eyes turned to him. He could feel the weight of their expectations, the hope in their expressions that he was about to embrace their vision for his future. He chose his words carefully, starting by expressing his gratitude for their hospitality and their interest in his well-being. He acknowledged the impressive success they had achieved, complimenting their business acumen and dedication. He spoke of his admiration for their entrepreneurial spirit and their commitment to helping others achieve financial independence. These were genuine sentiments, and he hoped they would serve as a buffer for what he needed to say next. Then, gently but firmly, Ryan began to express his reservations. He didn't directly criticize their business model or call it a pyramid scheme. That would have been insulting and counterproductive. Instead, he talked about his own career path, his passion for technology, his belief in creating value through innovation and problem solving. He explained that his definition of success was different from theirs, that he found fulfillment in building things, in solving complex challenges, in contributing to technological advancement. He acknowledged that his path might not lead to the kind of rapid wealth accumulation they valued, but it was authentic to who he was and what he believed in. As Ryan spoke, he could see the disappointment growing in their expressions. Carol's smile tightened. Robert's hand on his shoulder became heavier. Emma's face fell. Emma's brother and his wife exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. When Ryan finished, there was a tense silence in the room. Robert was the first to speak, his voice still warm, but with an undercurrent of condescension. He acknowledged Ryan's passion for his career, but suggested that he was thinking too small, limiting himself to a single income stream when he could be building multiple streams of passive income. Carol chimed in, her tone that of a patient teacher explaining a difficult concept to a slow student. She suggested that Ryan was confusing a job with a business, that he was trading his time for money when he could be building an asset that would generate income whether he worked or not. Emma's brother added his perspective, talking about how he had once been like Ryan, focused on his career, believing that hard work and loyalty to an employer would lead to financial security. But he had learned the hard way that true financial freedom came from owning your own business, from being in control of your own destiny. Throughout this, Ryan felt increasingly patronized, as if his life choices were being dismissed as naive or misguided. He had worked hard to build his career, to develop skills that were in demand and well compensated. He was proud of what he had accomplished, but in this room, surrounded by Emma's family, his achievements seemed small and insignificant. Emma finally spoke up, her voice soft but pleading. She talked about how much it would mean to her if Ryan joined their family business, how it would bring them closer together, how they could work as a team to build their future. She appealed to their relationship, to their shared dreams, to the life they could build together.
Ryan felt torn. He loved Emma and he wanted to make her happy, but he couldn't betray his own values, couldn't pretend to believe in something he fundamentally questioned. The tension in the room was palpable.
The unspoken question hanging in the air: would Ryan choose his relationship with Emma or his integrity? As if sensing Ryan's continued hesitation, Robert changed tactics once again. He began talking about risk, suggesting that Ryan was taking a bigger risk by relying on a single career path than he would by diversifying his income through their business opportunity. He painted a grim picture of corporate instability, of layoffs and downsizing, of technological disruption making even valuable skills obsolete. Carol added to this narrative, talking about economic uncertainty, the rising cost of living, the challenges of saving for retirement in an unpredictable world. She suggested that traditional employment was no longer a reliable path to financial security, that the only way to truly protect oneself and one's family was through entrepreneurship and multiple income streams. Ryan recognized these fear-based tactics for what they were, but he had to admit they had some validity. The world was changing rapidly, and the stability that previous generations had taken for granted was no longer guaranteed. But he still believed that his skills in software development would remain valuable, that adaptability and continuous learning would be his best defense against economic uncertainty. As the conversation continued, Ryan felt increasingly isolated. Emma's family presented a united front, their message reinforced by each member in turn. Even Emma, who he had thought shared his values, seemed completely caught up in their vision. He began to wonder if he had misjudged her, if their fundamental differences were greater than he had realized. The evening had taken a dark turn. What had started as a welcoming family dinner had devolved into a high-pressure sales pitch with emotional manipulation and relationship leverage used as tools of persuasion. Ryan felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and sadness. Anger at being put in this position, disappointment in Emma and her family, and sadness at the realization that their relationship might not be as compatible as he had thought. Finally, Ryan knew he had to end the evening, to escape the pressure cooker of the dining room and give himself space to think. He stood up, thanking them for dinner and for sharing their business opportunity with him. He tried to be polite and gracious, but he could hear the tension in his own voice, see the disappointment in their faces. The drive back to Ryan's apartment was silent and tense. Emma stared out the window, her arms crossed, her body language screaming disappointment. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing with the implications of the evening. When they arrived at Ryan's apartment, the silence continued as they walked inside. Ryan didn't know what to say, how to bridge the growing chasm between them. He had hoped that the Meet the Parents dinner would bring them closer, but instead, it had revealed fundamental differences in their values and expectations. Finally, Emma broke the silence, her voice tight with emotion. She couldn't understand why Ryan wasn't more open to her family's business opportunity. She saw it as a gift, A chance for them to build a future together, to achieve financial freedom and create the life they both wanted. She felt hurt and rejected that he couldn't see it the same way. Ryan tried to explain his position, to express his concerns about MLMs and his commitment to his career path. But Emma wasn't interested in his explanations. She saw his reluctance not as a difference in values or business philosophy, but as a rejection of her and her family. The conversation escalated, with Emma accusing Ryan of not being ambitious enough, of not wanting the best for their future, of not trusting her family's judgment. Ryan felt defensive, his own frustration and disappointment boiling over. He accused Emma's family of manipulation, of using their relationship as leverage to pressure him into a business decision he wasn't comfortable with. The argument went in circles, with neither side willing to compromise or see the other's perspective. Emma couldn't understand why Ryan wouldn't even consider the opportunity, why he was so close-minded about something that had brought her family so much success and happiness. Ryan couldn't understand why Emma couldn't respect his career choices, why she couldn't see the ethical and practical problems with the business model her family was promoting. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, they called a truce. Emma agreed to stay the night, but the distance between them felt vast and unbridgeable.
As they lay in bed, backs turned to each other, Ryan wondered if their relationship could survive this fundamental difference in values and expectations. The next morning, the tension remained. Emma was quiet and withdrawn, her usual warmth replaced by a cool reserve. Ryan tried to bridge the gap, suggesting they talk about something else, do something to take their minds off the previous night's drama. But Emma wasn't interested, her mind clearly still focused on Ryan's rejection of her family's business opportunity. When Emma left to go home, the goodbye was awkward and strained. Ryan watched her drive away, a heavy feeling in his chest. He didn't know where they stood, if they could move past this disagreement, if their relationship had a future. The Meet the Parents dinner that was supposed to be a milestone in their relationship had instead become a potential breaking point. Over the next few days, Ryan and Emma's communication was minimal. A few text messages, a brief phone call that felt forced and uncomfortable. Ryan missed Emma terribly, but he didn't know how to resolve the conflict without compromising his values. He wondered if he was being too rigid, too principled, if he should at least consider the opportunity her family had presented. Meanwhile, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he had been targeted, that the entire dinner had been orchestrated with the specific purpose of recruiting him into their MLM. He did some research on the company, confirming his suspicions about their business model and the low success rates for most participants. He found stories of people who had lost significant amounts of money, damaged relationships, and wasted years pursuing the dream of passive income that never materialized. Ryan also reflected on his own career path, questioning if he was being too closed-minded about alternative ways of achieving financial success. He acknowledged that his job as a software developer, while well-paying and relatively secure, still meant trading his time for money. He wondered if there was merit in diversifying his income, in exploring entrepreneurial opportunities outside the traditional employment model. But even as he considered these questions, Ryan kept coming back to his fundamental objections to MLMs, the emphasis on recruitment over product sales, the inflated promises of passive income, the exploitation of personal relationships for business gain. He couldn't reconcile these concerns with the ethical framework he tried to live by. A week after the disastrous dinner, Emma called Ryan. Her voice was still cool, but there was a hint of vulnerability in it. She suggested they meet to talk, to try to work through their differences. Ryan agreed, relieved that she was willing to try to bridge the gap between them. They met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop where they had their first date. The nostalgia of the setting was bittersweet, a reminder of how their relationship had begun and how it had changed over the past 6 months. Emma started the conversation, acknowledging that the dinner with her family had been intense and perhaps overwhelming. She admitted that they were passionate about their business and sometimes got carried away when sharing it with others. But she still couldn't understand why Ryan wasn't more open to at least considering the opportunity. Ryan listened, trying to understand her perspective while staying true to his own values. He explained his concerns about MLMs more gently this time, focusing on his personal values and career goals rather than criticizing her family's choices. He emphasized his commitment to his relationship with Emma, his desire to find a compromise that respected both of their values. As they talked, Ryan began to see the situation from Emma's perspective. Her family's business wasn't just a source of income for them. It was their identity, their community, their way of life. For Emma, Ryan's rejection of the business felt like a rejection of her family and everything they stood for. Emma, in turn, began to understand Ryan's position better. She acknowledged that his career was important to him, that he had worked hard to develop his skills and build his reputation. She admitted that perhaps her family had been too pushy, that they should have respected his choices even if they didn't agree with them. By the end of their conversation, they had reached a fragile truce. Emma agreed to respect Ryan's career choices, and Ryan agreed to keep an open mind about alternative income streams, though not necessarily through her family's MLM. They both acknowledged that they had fundamental differences in their approaches to life and business, but they committed to working through these differences for the sake of their relationship. The weeks following their coffee shop conversation were a delicate dance of compromise and understanding. Ryan and Emma made a conscious effort to reconnect, focusing on the aspects of their relationship that had brought them together in the first place: shared interests, mutual attraction, emotional connection, and similar life goals outside of business and career. They went on dates to their favorite restaurants, took weekend trips to the countryside, watched movies on the couch,
and talked late into the night about their dreams and fears. For a while, it seemed like they had successfully navigated the crisis created by the Meet the Parents dinner, that their relationship was back on track. But beneath the surface, the unresolved tensions lingered. Ryan couldn't forget the pressure he had felt that evening, the way Emma's family had used their relationship as leverage to recruit him into their business. He wondered if this was a one-time event or if it was indicative of how their relationship would be handled in the future. Emma, for her part, struggled with Ryan's continued rejection of her family's business opportunity. She had tried to respect his decision, but she couldn't help feeling that he was missing out on something wonderful, that he was limiting his potential and their future together by closing himself off to this possibility. The issue came to a head again when Emma mentioned that her family was hosting a business conference in a few months and wanted Ryan to attend. She presented it as an opportunity to learn more about their business in a less pressured environment, to network with successful entrepreneurs, and to support her family. Ryan felt a familiar tightening in his chest. He had made it clear that he wasn't interested in joining their MLM, and he had hoped that the matter was settled. The fact that Emma was still pushing him to engage with her family's business suggested that she hadn't fully accepted his decision. He gently declined the invitation, explaining that he didn't think it would be appropriate for him to attend a business conference for a company he had no intention of joining. He suggested that he could support Emma in other ways, helping her prepare, picking her up from the airport, celebrating her successes when she returned. Emma was disappointed, but she tried to hide it. She told Ryan she understood, but Ryan could see the hurt in her eyes. The distance between them widened again, the unspoken disagreement creating a barrier that was becoming increasingly difficult to cross. As the weeks passed, Ryan and Emma's interactions became more strained. They were still together, but the joy and spontaneity had gone out of their relationship. Every conversation felt carefully managed, every activity planned to avoid potential conflict. They were walking on eggshells around each other, afraid to bring up topics that might lead to disagreement. Ryan began to question the long-term viability of their relationship. He loved Emma, but he wondered if they could truly build a future together with such fundamental differences in values and expectations. He worried that every family gathering would turn into a sales pitch, every holiday an opportunity for recruitment. Emma was struggling too. She loved Ryan, but she couldn't understand why he couldn't see the value in her family's business, why he couldn't support their entrepreneurial spirit even if he didn't want to join himself. She felt caught between her loyalty to her family and her love for Ryan, and the tension was taking its toll. The breaking point came during a casual dinner with some of Emma's friends. One of them mentioned that they were looking for a career change and were interested in exploring entrepreneurial opportunities. Emma immediately started talking about her family's business, handing out brochures and inviting her friend to attend the upcoming conference. Ryan watched, feeling a familiar mix of frustration and disappointment. He had hoped that Emma's business pitch was reserved for him, a misguided attempt to include him in her family's world. But seeing her recruit her friends with the same tactics that had been used on him made him realize that this was just how she operated. Every social interaction was a potential business opportunity. After dinner, as they drove home, Ryan tried to talk to Emma about his concerns. He explained that it made him uncomfortable to see her use her friendships as recruitment opportunities, that he worried about the impact this approach had on her relationships. Emma became defensive, accusing Ryan of not understanding her business, of not supporting her ambitions. She argued that she was offering her friends a genuine opportunity to change their lives, that she was proud of what her family had built and wanted to share their success with others. The argument escalated, with old grievances resurfacing. Ryan brought up the Meet the Parents dinner, the pressure he had felt, the manipulation he had experienced. Emma accused Ryan of disrespecting her family, of not trusting her judgment, of being closed-minded about alternative ways of achieving success. By the time they arrived at Ryan's apartment, they were both angry and hurt. Emma announced that she needed some space, that she was going to stay with her parents for a few days to think. Ryan didn't argue, too exhausted and disappointed to fight anymore.
As Emma packed her things, Ryan felt a profound sense of loss. He wondered if this was the end of their relationship, if the differences between them were too fundamental to overcome. He had hoped that love would be enough to bridge their differences, but he was beginning to realize that shared values were just as important. When Emma left, the apartment felt empty and silent. Ryan sat on the couch, replaying their relationship in his mind, the early days of excitement and discovery, the gradual deepening of their connection, the hope he had felt about their future, and the slow erosion of that hope as their differences became more apparent. He knew that he couldn't compromise his values, couldn't pretend to believe in something he fundamentally questioned. But he also didn't want to lose Emma, didn't want to accept that their relationship was doomed because of this one issue, however significant it might be. The days after Emma left were difficult for Ryan. The apartment felt empty without her presence, and he found himself going through the motions of his daily routine without his usual enthusiasm. He threw himself into his work, coding late into the night, using the technical challenges to distract himself from the emotional turmoil. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on his projects, his thoughts kept returning to Emma and their relationship. He missed her terribly, her laugh, her touch, the way she understood him without words. He wondered if he was being too rigid, too principled, if he should at least consider her family's business opportunity for the sake of their relationship. At the same time, Ryan couldn't shake his fundamental objections to MLMs. He did more research, reading articles and watching documentaries about the industry. He found stories of families torn apart by financial losses and broken promises, of people who had alienated friends and relatives in pursuit of the dream of passive income. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that this was not a path he wanted to follow. Ryan also reflected on his own values and priorities. He had always prided himself on his integrity, on his commitment to creating value through hard work and innovation. He believed in building things that lasted, in solving problems that mattered, and contributing to society in a meaningful way. The MLM model, with its emphasis on recruitment over product sales and its inflated promises of easy wealth, didn't align with these values. After a week of soul-searching, Ryan realized that he couldn't compromise on this issue, not even for the sake of his relationship with Emma. He respected her family's right to choose their own path, but he couldn't join them on that path. The question now was whether their relationship could survive this fundamental difference in values. Meanwhile, Emma was having her own struggles at her parents' house. She loved her family and was proud of their success, but she couldn't ignore the tension that their business had created in her relationship with Ryan. She missed him terribly, and she wondered if she had been too pushy, too blinded by her family's enthusiasm to consider his perspective. Emma's mother, Carol, noticed her daughter's unhappiness and tried to talk to her about it. She acknowledged that the family had perhaps been too aggressive in their approach with Ryan, but she still believed that they were offering him a valuable opportunity. She suggested that Ryan might come around in time, that he just needed to see the success they were achieving for himself. Emma's father, Robert, had a different perspective. He had seen many relationships strained by the demands of the business, and he advised Emma to think carefully about what was most important to her. He acknowledged that not everyone was cut out for the MLM lifestyle, and that forcing Ryan to participate might ultimately do more harm than good. Emma's brother and his wife shared their own experiences, acknowledging that the business had put a strain on some of their relationships in the beginning. They advised Emma to be patient with Ryan, to give him space and time to adjust to the idea, but ultimately to respect his decision if he chose not to join. After several days of reflection and conversation with her family, Emma realized that she had been too focused on getting Ryan to join the business and not focused enough on understanding his perspective. She loved him for who he was, a kind, intelligent, principled man who was passionate about his work and committed to creating value in his own way. She didn't want to lose that, even if it meant accepting that he would never be part of her family's business. With this realization, Emma called Ryan and asked to meet. They chose a neutral location, a park where they had spent a memorable afternoon early in their relationship. The setting was symbolic, a reminder of what had brought them together and what they still shared. As they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, Emma started the conversation.
She apologized for the pressure her family had put on Ryan, for her role in that pressure, for not respecting his decision. She acknowledged that she had been caught up in her family's enthusiasm and had lost sight of what was most important, their relationship. Ryan listened, his heart aching with a mix of relief and lingering hurt. He appreciated Emma's apology, but he needed to know that she truly understood his position, that she could respect his choices even if she didn't agree with them. Ryan shared his own reflections, his research on MLMs, his concerns about the business model, his commitment to his own career path. He emphasized that his decision wasn't a rejection of her or her family, but a choice to stay true to his own values and principles. As they talked, Ryan and Emma began to find common ground. They acknowledged that they had different approaches to life and business, but they also recognized the values they shared: honesty, integrity, commitment, mutual respect. They realized that their relationship didn't have to be about business, that they could build a future together while pursuing different career paths. By the end of their conversation, they had reached a new understanding. Emma agreed to stop trying to recruit Ryan into her family's business, to respect his career choices, and to keep their romantic relationship separate from business discussions. Ryan, in turn, agreed to be more open-minded about entrepreneurial opportunities in general, to support Emma in her business endeavors, and to engage with her family in ways that didn't compromise his values. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They would still face challenges from family members who didn't understand their choices, from social situations where business and personal relationships overlapped, from their own lingering doubts and insecurities. But they were committed to making their relationship work, to finding a balance that honored both of their values and aspirations. 6 months later, Ryan and Emma were still together, their relationship stronger than ever. They had established clear boundaries around business discussions, focusing instead on the shared interests and values that had brought them together in the first place. Emma continued to work in her family's business, finding success on her own terms. Ryan advanced in his career as a software developer, taking on more challenging projects and expanding his skills. The Meet the Parents dinner that had once seemed like a potential breaking point in their relationship had become a story they told with laughter and perspective. The time Emma's family tried to sell Ryan a business opportunity instead of just getting to know him as their daughter's boyfriend. They had learned valuable lessons about communication, respect, and compromise, lessons that would serve them well as they built their future together. Ryan and Emma's relationship wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but they had found a way to navigate their differences, to honor both of their values and aspirations, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. And in the end, that was worth more than any business opportunity, no matter how lucrative it might seem.